If you're crazy enough to build a camper yourself, already neck deep in a project, or just curious to see how mine came together, this video is for you. I'll show you the full camper build from start to finish, give a lot of tips and tricks, tell you about the gear I have, and a rough breakdown of the costs. Now, I've taken this rig on a year-long world trip all the way to Iraq and survived a massive European tour. So I'd like to think I know a thing or two about what actually works. And while this is a Defender, most of what I'm showing you applies to almost any camper build, whether you're crossing borders or just going away for the weekend. The video is divided into chapters if you want to skip around, but watching the whole thing might just save you from making the same mistakes I did. Alright, grab a notepad, sit back, and let's get into it. When it comes to building a camper, almost anything on four wheels will do. But for me, it was pretty simple. I always wanted an old Land Rover Defender.
The new Land Rover 110. Better than ever.
Now, full disclosure, I had never actually driven one before, but there's just something about it. That badass look, wow. Old school simplicity, go anywhere, do anything vibe, the spacious interior, and not to forget, the high ground clearance, four-wheel drive, and locking differentials. It screams freedom, adventure, and bad decisions. It all started with test driving all kinds of Defenders, and after months, I finally found the one. A 2002 Defender 110 TD5, a classic Coniston green color, just under 150,000 kilometers. It even came with air conditioning plus a roof rack and a rooftop tent. So after a test drive, a check to see whether the Defender could fly mid-air, and getting the best price.
Do I look like I'm negotiating?
I bought it. Before we get to the current setup, let's take a massive step back, all the way to the very first camper build. And I mean that literally, because I had never built a camper before. No experience, no clue what I was doing, just a Defender and a very loose definition of a plan. But with that camper setup, I ended up driving through 17 countries, from the Netherlands all the way to Iraq and back, covering almost 18,000 kilometers. I started the build by completely removing the original interior and insulating the entire car using neoprene rubber. I used 2 layers of 4mm. It was cheaper and it allowed me to overlap the seams. You slap this stuff directly onto the bare metal, or in my case, aluminum. It fights condensation, kills that tin can road noise, and adds a nice layer of thermal insulation. And since it's so flexible, you can squeeze it into every weird corner of your camper. Simple, effective, and strangely satisfying to apply. I'll get to the new camper build in a second. It's completely different from this first version, but the reason I'm showing you this setup is because it's battle tested. It taught me a lot, and it might give you ideas for your own build. By the way, both are 2-person setups. I have to admit, rewatching footage of this first version did make me laugh. The finish looks like shit. Yeah, that's the right word. But I'll tell you the total cost of the build in a second, which makes it a little less shitty. Anyhow, at the time, I was genuinely proud of it. And more importantly, out of that entire unforgettable world trip, the places I visited, the people I met, I can tell you this, the interior of my Land Rover is the last thing I remember. In other words, It doesn't have to look perfect to be perfect. Keep that in mind when you are starting your build. So it wasn't my goal to build a hipster van with fairy lights and houseplants that somehow managed to survive. My plan was to build a functional, affordable, and lockable storage system that I could build myself. So I came up with this idea. A cabinet system that holds 6 medium boxes, 18 liters each, and 3 larger ones of 35 liters. I used transparent boxes so that it is easy to find my favorite yellow cup. The brand, by the way, is Really Useful Boxes. Yep, that's the name. Now, 9 boxes sound like a lot, and honestly, it is. Because I'm pretty sure at least a quarter of what I brought just went on a nice road trip and came straight back home untouched. Like stuff in the first aid kit, which is probably a good thing, but most of all, spare parts. And they take up a lot of space. For example, this chunky heavy alternator, it went all the way to Iraq and back, completely unused. Turns out, it's really hard not to overpack. Everything feels useful, but once you're on the road, you realize you could have left half of it behind. So here's a tip. When you're packing, be ruthless. Less is better, because what you bring, you won't need, and what you actually need, you probably didn't bring. Because at some point you are going to leave your car somewhere and just hope your stuff is still there when you get back. For this build, I used a simple metal bar to keep the boxes from flying around the car, which is nice. And it will also stop thieves from grabbing all my stuff. See? I used security rim locks, the kind you'd normally find on windows. I mounted them to a metal plate on the back, which you can't see, but that's kind of the point. So the whole setup is really solid. I'm showing you this because it pays to get creative with your camper build. Of course, there are other ways to lock and protect your stuff, but they usually come at a different price level. Most break-ins aren't planned. People are just scanning for quick wins. So the idea is that if some dipshit breaks in and tries to get my stuff, which isn't easy, plus the alarm that is going off, they hopefully just fuck off. Here are 3 smart tips. Number 1. The frustration tactic. Add something visible that suggests effort, like a strap through the door handles or an extra lock, anything that looks like a hassle. Number 2, target deprioritization. Make your car as unattractive as possible. You want them to think, yeah, there's nothing in there but disappointment. Number 3, hide your valuables. And hide them so well that even you have to put in some effort to get them. At one point I was carrying a decent amount of US dollars and I hid it so well it literally took me about 5 minutes to get it. Let's move on. I use this wooden panel as part of the bat. You take it out like so. You place it right over here. I use these bench cushions as part of the mattress. And then you have yourself a little bed inside the car. I only sleep inside the Defender when the weather gets so bad that sleeping in the rooftop tent just isn't an option anymore. At some point, the weather is going to turn on you hard. Crazy winds, pounding rain, the whole shebang. I've had nights where it got so bad it honestly felt like the tent was about to rip straight off the car. So just be prepared, because one day you won't have a choice. You'll have to sleep inside your car. To give you a rough idea of the total cost of the interior build, here's what I've spent. The 9 heavy-duty storage boxes were 125 euros. The 3 rim locks cost 60. The metal pipes, sheet metal and L profiles came in at 75 euros. For the interior, I used 4 12mm plywood panels, some of them painted black, for a total of 160. The ceiling was one of the more expensive parts. 27 wooden slats costing a painful 170 euros. The custom-made bench cushions were 130. Then the smaller stuff, 7 euros for the carpet, 12 for the compartment locks, and around 60 euros for wood glue, screws, bolts and other fasteners. That brings the total cost to 846 euros. And just to be clear, that's only the interior. The equipment isn't included. I'll get into that later on. Could I have built it for less? Yeah, I think so. But in my opinion, this is already pretty basic. I mean, those wooden slats are a pretty big part of the cost. The reason I went for them is because the original headliner sits quite low, and by replacing it with slats, I gained a few extra centimeters of headroom. And I know that might not sound like much, but in a camper, every centimeter counts. That's what she said. 99% of people who've built a camper would change things if they had to do it all over again. And yeah, I'm definitely one of them. Because no matter how good everything looks on paper, the moment you actually start living in it, you very quickly find out what works and what absolutely doesn't. So, if you can, go test camping, especially when your build isn't finished yet. It's much easier to change the design when it's not glued and screwed into place. Don't ask me how I know this. As I mentioned earlier, my main focus for this build was storage. So naturally, I built everything else around the storage system, which sounded like a great idea at the time, until I realized things like the fridge barely opened, the bench wasn't exactly comfortable,
it's a bit too short,
and although I still like the idea of the transparent box storage system, it just took up way too much space, which I filled with junk I never actually used. So yeah, I did what any reasonable person would do. I ripped everything out. And that's how you remove a zillion hours of work in about 30 seconds. Even though it might look like I'm just tearing everything apart, a lot of the wood, screws and other materials will be reused in the new build. The insulation stays. It's still in great shape. Now, stay tuned, because we're about to deep dive into the juicy details of the entire build. Now, I would highly recommend building a cardboard version of your dream camper. It's an easy and cheap way to figure out if the ideas living inside your "this will definitely fit" brain actually match the space inside your rolling metal shoebox. Here's how my cardboard brain mapped it out. On the left, we've got a lounge area that stretches all the way behind the driver's seat, with actual room to sit this time. On the right, the kitchen, loaded with storage and a solid workspace. Up top, an overhead compartment and a shelf for the easy-to-reach essentials. I can drop a plywood panel between the bench and the kitchen, turning the whole middle section into a decent-sized bed. And once you're done, step into your cardboard dream world. Is there enough legroom? Does the kitchen height actually make sense? How much space do you really have in those overhead compartments? Don't be a dummy. This is how you try it out and test it properly. Another advantage is that you get a much better sense of the space you have for all that stuff I mentioned earlier. I'm happy with how my cardboard vision turned out, so now it's time for the best part, the actual build. The car is completely empty again, and now I can start with measuring everything and begin with cutting all the wooden panels. Underneath the bottom panel is an inspection hatch for the fuel pump. I'm gonna use a little push pin and put it exactly in the middle of the inspection hatch. Alright, check it out. Where is it? There it is. To prevent the plywood from looking like a beaver chewed on it, I go over the line with a craft knife first. This severs the top fibers so that when the saw blade comes through, the wood doesn't tear out. I also throw some masking tape along the cut line for extra insurance. It takes a little longer, but the clean edges are totally worth it. So the biggest challenge is this panel on the left side, which is part of the lounge area, the storage system and the bed. That means a lot of cutting to make everything fit. And the biggest challenge? I want to make it all from a single sheet of plywood. Now, from the outside, the car basically looks like a brick, which probably also explains why it's not exactly fast. But on the inside, there are way more weird angles and awkward corners than you'd expect, all of which I somehow need to account for. So yeah, what could possibly go wrong? The left panel, the L-shaped panel, is cut to the right size. I had to remove some wood over here, as you can see, otherwise the door wouldn't close, so I fixed that. I drilled a little hole for the wires, but I got a little bit excited, so I drilled the hole on the wrong side, as you can see. But if I take a little L profile, you know, it's gone. Perfect. And now it's time for the most interesting part of the build, which is the storage. I'm going to create 3 different storage compartments which are accessible via the top side. So this means figuring out the exact dimensions, which basically just comes down to an ungodly amount of measuring and cutting. Now, please don't ask me why I insisted on rounded quarters for these lids. Square would have been perfectly fine and way easier. Luckily, this random paint can had the exact radius I needed. Alright, just look at the end result. That's pretty awesome. I've never built something like this, and I think it worked out great. To build the lids themselves, I'm just recycling some scrap plywood from the previous build. And after a lot of cutting, sanding, a minor misjudgment that we won't talk about, more cutting and more sanding, I successfully made 3 perfectly fitting lids. And after some sanding, it's time to paint everything. My original plan was to use this little edge here that's sticking out as a support for the lid. This is not the lid, but you get the idea, like so. But I don't think it's strong enough, so with a little bit of adjustment, I'm gonna move this to the front. And then now I'm going to use this as a support for the lid, like so. I installed the little support beam. For the storage dividers, I routed a groove into a wooden strip and cut it to length. This allows the divider panels to slot right in. This little thing goes over here. This little thing goes over here, like so. One I can put on top. This one. And that goes over here, like, I'm gonna put it over here, obvious. Ta-da! Ugly screw, no ugly screw. Good. I built this corner box to house the speaker and, more importantly, to hide the wiring for the taillights. Pro tip, make the speaker hole big enough for your hand. It saves a lot of swearing if you ever need to get to the cables later. I also squeezed in a small shelf with a USB charger on top. It's the little things that make a camper feel like home. This side panel, what you see over here, is the insulation. I was planning on putting wood against it, but I'm not going to do it because I bought some pretty cheap carpet. And as you can see, this carpet is really thin and flexible. So it's a perfect match for this curvy side panel. This already looks so much better. It's such a cheap and easy solution, but the end result is really nice. I do have to fix this, but it'll be fine. Before we continue with the rest of the build, I'm actually pulling the side window out. I'll explain why later. But since you're going to notice a giant hole where the glass used to be, I figured I'd better mention it. Just so you don't start wondering if the fender windows just fall out of the frame. They might, but not in this case. For today's little project, I'm going to build a panel which I'm going to install right over here. Since I'm sitting on a ton of leftover carpet fabric, I've decided to line the panel with it. It's practical and it matches the rest of the build. There it is. I knew it. I had like a little lashing strap left, and what I'm going to do is fold it together like this, and now you have a little handle, and after fixing it with a lock bolt to the lid, I have a cheap but functional drawer pull. Before I can finish this part of the build, I'm putting together a ventilated platform, because a cold water tank in a warm car is a recipe for condensation and mold, so these cutouts are vital for airflow. I'm using water-resistant plywood and edge sealer to ensure everything stays dry. Though next time I'd probably just use an anti-condensation mat. For now, it's all about using what I have on hand. Now, I haven't told you an important detail about the water tank, but I will later in the video. For now, I'm going to install the dividers between the house battery, storage space, and water tank. I cut the heads of these bolts to turn them into pins. These slide into small holes in the bottom, and to keep the lids in place, I'm using magnets that snap onto a metal strip on top. Alright, the kitchen and storage. Let me explain the plan so you actually know what the hell you're looking at. The build is divided into 3 sections. A horizontal sheet of plywood divides the top from the bottom, and in front is a panel with all the cutouts for the cabinet doors. On top of it all sits a massive countertop. I originally planned to keep things simple. That plan failed instantly, but that's okay. Even though I wasn't entirely sure how I was going to build it, I just started, and this is the result coming together. After spending too much time on the internet, I finally found the perfect hinge. This one. Perfect for the job. I also got the locks. So, if you're a camper or caravan owner, you've probably recognized the locks. They're push locks. So I got these, but there's one little problem. The minimal diameter for these locks is 16 millimeters, but the panels I'm using are 12 millimeters, so I'm short 4 millimeters. To solve the problem, I bought a small slat, this one, and and this is about the same size as the push lock. This is 5 millimeters, but who's counting? And my initial plan was to put this behind the lid to act as a filler plate, but I think it's too big and too ugly. So I'm going to put it on the front of the lid so it's visible, but I'm going to make it look cool and fancy. First, I will cut out a circle, then I will drill a hole inside that circle, and now I have a wooden ring. Alright, that's it. Look, this is the end result, and that looks pretty awesome. Yeah, the timing is just perfect. Oh well. I'm using these 3 millimeter washers to make sure the lid is exactly in the middle. And now let's quickly drill some holes before Thor ruins this day. Oh man. After finishing the storage compartment, I continued building some parts for the final assembly. So here it is, the divider, and now I only have to paint it and then I can assemble everything. Alright, the front panel is in, so now it's time to install the lids. So yeah, I built the kitchen worktop and now it's finally starting to look like a real overland camper. Okay, so first I have to determine the location for the sink. So I can install it like this or like this. This is how I'm going to install the sink. I'm prepping the tabletop with some leftover paint for a solid protective layer. After that, I'm gluing on a material that's, well, let's just say a little unconventional, but stay with me on this one. The kitchen section is about 99% there. And yes, that's floor vinyl on the countertop. It's durable, easy to wipe down, and it saved me the headache of painting on a protective 2K clear coat. A bit of a strange choice, maybe, but it works. Moving on to the windows. If you want to know more about the full installation, you can find the link to that dedicated episode in the description. This is the old leaky window. I am not going to repair and reinstall it because I bought something else. Removing the old window was actually a pretty straightforward job. You just pull out the rubber seal to reveal all the rivets and drill them out. And in my case, I could easily remove the whole thing, and that was it. So yeah, I bought two windows, and yes, I'm going to replace the rear left and rear right window. So this is the expedition window, also known as a gull wing because it opens all the way up. This is going to replace the rear right window. The second one is a half drop window, which you can lock in a few different positions. Plus I grabbed this window protector to finish it off. That is looking badass. I have to make one little adjustment because there are small pieces of metal sticking out over here, and it's the same on the other side. So I have to remove those first. That is already a perfect fit, and now I have to drill the holes for the new window. around the whole window. Sealant has pushed out, which is a good thing. It means I used enough but not too much, and now it's just a matter of removing all that excessive sealant. All in all, really happy with the result. The window looks just amazing on the Defender, especially the black with the green bodywork. So yeah, I'm glad I bought this one and I didn't keep the old Defender window. Installing the rear right window is pretty much the same as the left one. Remove the rubber, drill out the rivets, remove the window. Okay, the last step is installing the gas struts. Now that I've installed the gull wing, I can finally finish the kitchen/storage build. But before I can install the kitchen worktop, there's one important step I have to take, and that is I'm going to put the sink somewhere over here. So I'm going to put the drainage over there, so the hose is nicely tucked away in the back. I'm going to use this pipe to pre-cut the thread in the Defender's bodywork for the hose connector, which has the same thread size, and that's the upside of aluminum. It's pretty soft, so this should not be a problem. Oh, that's it. Bye-bye. No, wait, there is one thing. Yeah, man, you almost forgot to mention the new ceiling. Stripping the interior revealed a new problem. The sun had oxidized these wood slats into a nasty yellowish color. It's way worse in person than it looks on screen. To fix it, I bought some cheap paint and I'm thinning it down to give the wood a quick whitewash. And with that, I get rid of the wood color, but I keep the wood texture because the texture is what I like. Well, I have no idea what the best ratio is, the paint water ratio, so let's start with 5 scoops. I'm thinking about adding like 3 scoops of water. Check it out. This is the before and this is the after. So now I have to clean, sand and paint 32 of these. Yep. the paint is dry and this is the end result. So, now it's time to install the ceiling. To hold the slats in place at the back, I'm using a wide U-profile. For the curved corners, I cut it into segments matching the exact width of the slats. To secure everything in the middle, I screw the slats straight into the hollow roof channel, which is not a problem. To prevent the ceiling from freely floating in the air, I will apply the same solution as I did with the slats in the back of the car. And that is, I'm going to put this above all the slats, and I'm going to screw them to this piece of wood so everything is nice and straight. Okay, that's a big improvement. Oh, and about the shelf part of the overhead compartment, the white color makes the whole thing look pretty cheap. So, I painted it the same color as all the other panels. But this looks way better. I'm wedging an aluminum strip into both sides of the roof. It shoves the slats against the ceiling so hard that it only takes one single screw to hold everything up. Is it structurally sound for off-roading? Questionable. Does it look pretty? Absolutely. Looking back, I'm really happy with the result. The black interior might be up for debate, but at least it hides the dirt. The storage compartments under the bench cushions are all fitted with locks. To save myself from a daily mental breakdown, I color-coded every lock with its matching key. Zero guessing. These compartments are about 20 liters each. This is where I stash the gear I don't need every single day. I also keep a packing list on my phone, so I actually remember where I buried it all. That's a pro tip, by the way. On the right side, we have storage for the daily essentials like clothes, cooking gear and food. The top cabinets are around 100 liters each, and the bottom ones around 50 liters. Yes, that is a ridiculous amount of space. I thought about doing drawers instead of these cabinet doors, but then you're dealing with a whole different level of building and costs. I actually ended up really liking the kitchen countertop made from floor vinyl. It's a bit of a quirky choice, but the easy cleaning is an absolute lifesaver. For me, a big workspace is a no-brainer, especially when you're stuck inside the camper on rainy days. The gullwing is a really nice improvement. Not only does it give you massive airflow on hot days, but I can also grab anything straight from the outside without constantly crawling in and out of the car. During my trip, I added this stainless steel cutlery stand from IKEA. It means I can easily grab a fork, knife or spoon without having to dig through a box every single time. On the back of the door is my Coleman Stove, and underneath a small foldable table to put it on. Nothing fancy, just practical. And the best part, you can also open this box from the inside for those, yes, miserable rainy days. Like so. Right above the sink, I installed a switch to turn the water pump on and off. It's a tiny detail, but it works incredibly well. Just like in my first camper build, I used the backrest panel as part of the bed. I dropped the panel onto these wooden supports and the camper turns into a bedroom. The bench cushions double as the mattress. By the way, get cushions that are at least 10 centimeters thick, not the 5 centimeters I went with, because you will sleep like shit. All in all, building this interior cost me about 1,200 euros. The total cost of the 12-volt system is coming up next. I didn't do any upgrades to the car, it's totally standard. I just made sure everything was technically in order, and by doing almost all the maintenance myself, I really got to understand the vehicle. I have a bit of an unpopular opinion when it comes to upgrades. Bigger tires? They just put more stress on the drivetrain. You don't need them. Roll cages? Really? What exactly are you planning to do? And let's not forget winches. Oh man, those are mostly just useful for helping other people out. If you actually need a winch for yourself, you probably made a really bad driving decision about 10 minutes earlier. Remember, you're an overlander first and an off-roader second. This is the current layout of the electrical system. Don't panic, it's not all wired up yet. Instead of showing you a montage of me crimping wires, I'm going to explain the actual strategy behind this 12-volt setup, because that's where the real value is. Before my first big trip, I was stressing over two things. How much battery do I need and how much solar do I buy? The classic amateur mistake is over-specifying everything. I almost did it too, driven by the absolute terror of running out of that delicious power juice. But unless you're building a rolling mansion with a built-in washing machine and a 55-inch television, you need way less than you think. For my setup, I had 2 phones, a tablet, a laptop and batteries for my camera, drone and GoPro, plus a work light. I also needed to power the water pump and the compressor fridge, which runs 24/7. If you need to figure out your own solar setup, don't overthink it. There are tons of free tools online to do the math for you. Just Google 12-volt solar calculator. Because space is tight on the Defender, I couldn't just throw massive panels up there. My roof rack has a large aluminum box on it, so I mounted a flexible 80-watt panel on that. Side note, nowadays I would definitely go for a rigid monocrystalline panel instead. They're just way more efficient than the flexible ones. I also bought a portable 100-watt panel with a long cable. But here's the funny part. That 80-watt panel did almost all the heavy lifting. I barely used the portable one. It's a nice backup if you want to park in the shade and throw the panel out into the sun, but most of the time it just stayed packed away. And there's a secret weapon that made that 80-watt panel viable, which I will tell you in a second. To safely feed that solar power into the house batteries, I used a Victron Energy SmartSolar MPPT 7515 charge controller. Now, the secret weapon? A battery combiner kit. Get one. Trust me. So, while you drive, this device charges your house batteries, which doesn't affect the starter battery. That meant every time I pulled up to camp off-grid, the house batteries were 100% charged, even on a cloudy day. For the batteries themselves, I looked at AGM versus lithium. Lithium is better. I think everyone will tell you that. But when I looked at the price tag, my wallet literally started crying. So I went with two 95 amp AGM batteries from VARTA instead. Lastly, the inverter. Do not buy a massive, expensive 2000 watt unit if you don't need it. Find your hungriest device, for me it's my laptop at 130 watts, and match the inverter to that. My little 300 watt inverter handles it perfectly, takes up zero space, and didn't break the bank. For the whole 12 volt system, I paid 1,350 euros. This got me through a brutal year-long world trip and a massive loop around Europe. I didn't run out of power once, the fridge never shut off, and my gear was always charged. Though after putting them through that much abuse, replacing the old AGM batteries for a fresh set is probably a smart move. By the way, if you like to see the simple but effective schematic of my 12 volt setup, you can download it for free on my Patreon page. Just go to patreon.com/havefunandgo, join for free, and you can download it there. I would definitely recommend getting a good quality compressor fridge. This is the Dometic CoolFreeze CFX40. I bought this one about 7 years ago, and after running a zillion hours, it's still as cold as a nudist campsite at 3 AM in November. A compressor fridge isn't cheap, but it is a great investment. I think even a second hand from a decent brand, 2 or 3 years old, can be a really good option. Because of the new interior design, the old 103 liter tank didn't fit anymore, so I bought an 83 liter instead, which is still massive. Yep. But recommended if you want to stay in the middle of nowhere for a couple of days. If you're more likely to go camping for long weekends, 40 liters is more than enough. Attached to my water tank is a self-priming electric pump from Marco, but the interesting part is actually the filtration. Because when it comes to water on the road, you've got a few options. You buy bottled water, you filter, or you take your chances. Now, I prefer not to gamble with my stomach, and buying bottled water gets really expensive over time. So here are the 3 basics. Number 1, trust the source. Don't drink from that questionable puddle next to a goat. A simple trick is to bring a small clear bottle. You can fill it with the water from the source so you can actually see what you're dealing with. And if something is swimming in there that looks more alive than you are in the morning, maybe skip it. Number 2. Sediment filtration. This removes sand, dirt and other large particles. I have one of these installed before the water pump to protect the system. Number 3, a proper water filter. Don't cheap out here, get a good one. The 10-inch Aqualogic Inline C I'm using combines an ultra membrane with an activated carbon core. It has a bacteria reduction rate of 99.9999%, so it deals with things like cholera, typhoid, and Legionella. Basically everything you really don't want to mess with. It also filters micro and nanoplastics down to about 0.03 microns, and that's exactly why I chose this specific setup. Other brands to look into are Waterdrop and LifeStraw. The cost for all of this, the water tank, the pump, filter, hoses and connectors, were around 500 euros. Before my first big trip, I thought having hot water was absolutely essential. So I looked into all the traditional options. A gas boiler, then you always have to worry about carrying enough gas. A 12-volt electric boiler, that's a massive battery killer. And a diesel combi heater, ridiculously expensive. And then I found a cheaper, simpler alternative, a heat exchanger. Inside this compact box are two separate layers. Cold water flows through one and hot coolant through the other. The water absorbs the heat and comes out the other side nice and warm. It sounded perfect, but honestly, the number of times I actually used it is pretty much zero. But I still think it's a good option. So how did I get my hot water instead? Well, it's pretty simple. I just boiled it. And other times, I just used a solar shower bag. You just hang it in the sun for a bit. And honestly, you'd be amazed at how fast that water heats up. For cooking, I wanted something indestructible, something that would work literally anywhere on the planet. And that's why I went back to the basics and chose this, the Coleman Unleaded 2-burner stove, the 424. Is it a bit old school? Yeah, but it pumps out a crazy amount of heat. It's built like a tank and, most importantly, petrol is available in every single corner of the globe. Now, the only downside to this thing is the maintenance. Because it runs on regular car fuel, the stove can get clogged up with soot over time. So every now and then you have to take it apart and clean it. If there's one thing you take away from this entire video, let it be this. Building a camper will take way more time than you think. Way more. But here is the real secret. The camper does not make the trip. I mean, you can spend months over engineering the ultimate layout, but the moment you hit the road, none of that matters. Even if you think your build is absolutely flawless right now, it's not. And that is completely okay. Because you will make mistakes, and that one specific building mistake, it will annoy you for the next 18,000 kilometers. But even then, it becomes part of the story. Alright, if you enjoyed watching this, please consider subscribing and giving it a thumbs up. It really helps me. Also, if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments. Thanks for watching, happy building, and have fun and go.